We live in a world that often tells us to hide our vulnerabilities, to conceal our weaknesses, and to present ourselves as invulnerable, as if we could somehow escape the inevitable struggles of being human. Society has ingrained this belief that being strong means being perfect, that showing our pain is a form of failure, and that displaying our flaws makes us less worthy of respect or love. But here's the truth. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is, in fact, our greatest measure of courage. In a world where we are conditioned to hide behind facades, to present an image of success and control, the act of being vulnerable, of letting down our guard, of showing our true selves, takes more bravery than we could ever imagine. Vulnerability is not about being weak. It's about being real. We've all been there, haven't we? The pressure to appear strong, confident, and unshakable. To put on a mask that tells the world, I have everything together, even when, deep down, we're struggling with something that feels too overwhelming to face. But what if I told you that in that very struggle, in that moment of uncertainty, lies the potential for your greatest growth? It is in our most vulnerable moments, those times when we feel exposed, when we allow ourselves to be raw, that we are actually showing the greatest courage. Because to be vulnerable is to be real, to be authentic, and to open ourselves up to the possibility of connection, healing, and transformation. There's a beautiful truth that we often overlook. It takes more strength to admit that we don't have all the answers, to show that we are human, than to pretend that we do. How many times have you felt that deep-seated fear of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood because of something you were too afraid to share? We've all felt it. But let me remind you of something. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It is a powerful form of strength. It is a force that drives us to connect, to grow, and to find the courage to face the challenges that we would otherwise run from. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we are not admitting defeat. We are embracing our humanity. We are saying, I am not perfect and I do not have all the answers, but I am here and I am willing to face the truth, no matter how difficult it may be. It's easy to hide behind a mask, to pretend that everything is fine when it's not. But that mask keeps us from truly living. It keeps us from experiencing the richness of human connection, the depth of authentic relationships, and the transformative power of vulnerability. By showing our true selves, by allowing others to see the real, unpolished version of who we are, we give them permission to do the same. And here's where the magic happens. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we invite others to be vulnerable with us. We create a space where people no longer feel they have to put on a facade, a space where they can be honest, open, and free to express their own struggles, fears, and dreams. In this space, we begin to see the beauty of human connection. We realize that we are not alone in our struggles, that everyone is fighting their own battles, even if they are not immediately visible. The act of being vulnerable is not just about us. It's about creating a community, a network of people who are willing to show up for each other in their most real and raw form. Now, let's think about courage for a moment. What does it really mean to be courageous? It's easy to think that courage is about being fearless, about charging into the unknown with no hesitation. But real courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about facing that fear head on and continuing to move forward in spite of it. It's about standing tall even when you feel small and pressing on even when the weight of the world is bearing down on you. Courage is the decision to show up for life, even when life feels overwhelming. And one of the most courageous things you can do in life is to be vulnerable. You see, vulnerability requires us to surrender the illusion of control, to admit that we cannot handle everything on our own. It requires us to be humble, to say, I need help, and to acknowledge that we are not invincible. This is not weakness. This is the courage to be honest with ourselves and others, to strip away the pride that keeps us isolated, and to allow ourselves to be seen as we truly are. In a world that tells us to be self-sufficient, to rely on no one but ourselves, to build walls around our hearts, vulnerability is the antidote. It is the practice of tearing down those walls and allowing ourselves to connect with others on a deeper, more meaningful level. There is a profound wisdom in vulnerability that we cannot afford to overlook. It teaches us the value of empathy, compassion, and connection. When we show our vulnerabilities, we are not only sharing our own experiences, but also inviting others to share theirs. And in that sharing, we realize that we are all in this together. We all experience pain, disappointment, and fear, but we also experience hope, joy, and triumph. When we acknowledge our vulnerability, we open ourselves up to the full spectrum of human experience. And in doing so, we discover the depth of our own strength. If we continue to hide our vulnerabilities, we will forever remain prisoners of our own pride. We will live in isolation, disconnected from the very thing that makes us human, the ability to connect with others in our most vulnerable state. We will continue to wear masks, pretending that everything is fine when it's not, all the while feeling more and more alone. But when we choose to embrace vulnerability, we choose to live fully. We choose to let go of the need for perfection and accept ourselves as we are, flaws and all. And that is the beginning of true strength. Because it is only when we allow ourselves to be seen, to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, that we can truly begin to heal, to grow, and to experience the beauty of what it means to be human. So the next time you feel the fear of showing your vulnerability, remember this. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is not something to be ashamed of or hidden away. It is a powerful expression of courage, a testament to your strength, and a doorway to deeper connection and growth. It is in our most vulnerable moments that we discover our true potential. And it is in those moments that we realize we are not weak at all, but stronger than we ever thought possible. So embrace vulnerability. It is the greatest measure of courage you will ever possess. Life in all its complexity requires us to make a choice between two paths. One path leads us toward growth, resilience, and strength, while the other keeps us tethered to our comfort zones, bound by fear and unwilling to venture into the unknown. And at the heart of this choice lies a fundamental truth. We cannot grow without vulnerability. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It is the very gateway to our greatest potential. It is in the act of being vulnerable that we unlock our ability to grow, to evolve, and to step into the life we are meant to live. You see, vulnerability is not about being exposed for the sake of it, nor is it an invitation for others to take advantage of us. It is about recognizing that we, as human beings, are imperfect, and yet there is immense power in accepting that imperfection. Vulnerability, in this sense, is not a passive state. It is an active state. It is an active choice to face our fears, our shortcomings, and the parts of ourselves that we often prefer to hide. It is in these moments of exposure that we begin to see the possibility for real change. To be vulnerable is to make the conscious decision to allow ourselves to grow beyond what we thought was possible, to step out of the shadows of self-doubt, and to embrace the light of self-awareness. The world is full of noise, expectations, demands, pressures from every direction, all telling us who we should be, what we should look like, and how we should behave. We are conditioned to believe that strength means perfection, that success is achieved only when we've mastered every part of ourselves. But this idea is a trap, a lie that keeps us stuck in a perpetual cycle of self-rejection. Perfection is a mirage. You are not going to fit in. True strength is found in the willingness to be imperfect, to face our vulnerabilities head on and to learn from them. This doesn't mean we throw ourselves into the world expecting everyone to understand or accept us immediately. It means we are brave enough to face the discomfort of being seen for who we really are, imperfect, flawed, and yet capable of achieving great things. And in those moments of discomfort, when we feel vulnerable, something remarkable happens. We realize that we are not alone. Our vulnerabilities connect us to others. They allow us to see that we are not the only ones struggling, not the only ones who have felt the weight of the world on their shoulders. The beauty of vulnerability is that it opens the door for connection. It invites others to share their own experiences, their own struggles, and in that exchange, we find solidarity. It is through our vulnerability that we learn that we are all in this together. We begin to understand that our greatest strength lies not in our ability to appear invincible, but in our willingness to embrace the human experience in all its messiness, complexity, and beauty. But vulnerability is not always easy. It requires us to confront the very things we fear the most. It asks us to step into the unknown, to take risks, and to trust that even when things go wrong, we will emerge stronger on the other side. Vulnerability Vulnerability challenges us to let go of the idea that we can control every outcome, that we can predict every consequence. It teaches us that life is unpredictable, that we cannot always control our circumstances, but we can control how we respond to them. We cannot avoid pain, but we can choose how we handle it. And it is through this choice, through this act of embracing vulnerability, that we begin to unlock the power to transform our lives. It's important to understand that vulnerability is not just about exposing our weaknesses. It is about embracing the full range of our experiences, including the ones that scare us the most. The fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being good enough. They all stem from our desire to protect ourselves, to shield ourselves from pain. But in avoiding pain, we miss out on the opportunity for growth. Every struggle, every setback is an invitation to grow, to learn, and to become more resilient. The more we avoid vulnerability, the more we limit ourselves. The more we allow ourselves to face the discomfort, to lean into the fear, the more we expand our capacity to succeed, to love, and to experience life to the fullest. In fact, the very act of vulnerability is a sign of strength. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we acknowledge that we do not have all the answers, that we are not invincible, and that we need help. This is not a weakness. It is an acknowledgement of our humanity. It is the courage to admit that we cannot do everything on our own, and that's okay. It's the understanding that we are all in this together, that we are all learning, growing, and evolving as we go. And it is in this humility and this willingness to admit our limitations that we discover our greatest strength. To embrace vulnerability is to embrace life in all its messiness. It is to say that we are willing to experience the highs and lows, the successes and failures with an open heart. It is to give ourselves permission to be imperfect, to make mistakes and to learn from them. This is the essence of growth, the willingness to be uncomfortable, to face the unknown, and to rise above it. Life doesn't wait for us to feel ready. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect circumstances. Life is happening now. And it is in our vulnerability that we can truly step into it. So how do we begin to embrace vulnerability in our own lives? First, we must stop pretending that we have everything under control. We must stop hiding behind our facades, pretending that we are invincible, and start accepting ourselves as we are. This doesn't mean giving up or resigning ourselves to mediocrity. It means being willing to step outside our comfort zones and trust that in doing so, we will discover the strength we need to move forward. It means being brave enough to face our fears, to acknowledge our weaknesses, and to use them as stepping stones on our path to greatness. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we are not admitting defeat. We are acknowledging that there is power in our humanity, that we are capable of far more than we think, and that in our vulnerability, we find our greatest strength. So I urge you, embrace vulnerability. Lean into the discomfort. It is only by doing so that you will unlock the courage and strength within you to live the life you are truly meant to live.